Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Burst Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andrew.
My name is Tiffany, and this is the Life Burst Podcast, a Wixoss podcast where we talk about all the Wixoss things and only the Wixoss things. Welcome back, fellow selectors.
Welcome back, selectors. I see what you did there.
Well, I
Welcome
mean, yeah.
back, Lost Storage selectors.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's good. It's good.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
I see you.
Yeah.
Hey, Tiffany. How are
Hey,
you doing?
Andrew. I'm doing pretty good.
Great.
Great.
I'm doing good, too. I'm doing better since Lucky Yuki sent us some gift stuffs.
What did Lucky Yuki send you?
Oh, I have a Bang playmat here now.
Yay!
It's really pretty.
You also have one of those really cute enamel pins.
Yeah, she does sell the enamel pins too, which are pretty adorable.
I have to tell you, I get so many compliments on my Ancient Surprise enamel pin set because I have them on my Ita bag.
Yeah.
I get so many compliments on it.
Yeah, I'm not much of an enamel pin guy myself, but I do have one bag that I use for when we're like going gaming. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not one for giant backpacks to bring everything if I can help it. I like just a slim backpack, like just this that you do across the shore. Mm-hmm. So I have a space for one pin, and Bang is on there now. And she's looking cute.
She's so cute.
Yeah. And she also sent us some cards. You got a cool one, though, from there. I assume it's you. It was an Ancient Surprise thing, which usually means not me.
Yeah, I got a full like gold foil Lucky Yuki Christmas Tall level 0.
Yeah, it's literally like everything you want in a card.
Everything I want in a level 0. I'm really excited. I hope that she makes more of them.
Yeah.
For other cards.
Per the usual, Lucky Yuki is still putting out monthly cards that you can get. Tiffany, one of your friends actually collected some happy birthday ones as well and gave it to you for your birthday.
I did. I now have a happy birthday Tawil and a happy birthday Umer.
Yeah.
I'm just missing the happy birthday Ott.
It'll get there.
But
yeah, so it ended up being a pretty cool Lucky Yuki week, guys. If you
good haul
want to join Lucky Yuki's Patreon and get monthly promos, you can do so. And stores also can give out Lucky Yuki's items as giveaways for the store, monthly events too.
Yep.
So,
highly recommend it. Art's super cute, very well done. We get a lot of compliments on it, and it's really fun to play with too. So please make sure that you check out Lucky Yuki Customs.
Super accurate, and the link is in the description. Tiffany.
Andrew.
You know how in the anime, they all had kind of superpowers at one point?
Yes.
So our topic today...
You're talking about the non-Diva series?
Yes. Mm-hmm. They had powers.
Yeah, they all got special
abilities.
Catchphrases,
special abilities. Mm-hmm. And the one that we're going to be talking about today is Pearluke's Peeping.
Peeping!
Because we're going to teach you guys how to do peeping in real life, but not the one that gets you arrested.
Wow.
Just in the card games.
We're also not talking about the piece. We're talking about how you can hone your skills as a player to use the visual cues and player cues on the board to make the best decisions for your game and take your competitive edge to the next level.
Yes, this comes from actually a Magic the Gathering debate that happened in like 2010. We're going way back.
Ooh, way back.
Splinter Twin was the default deck.
I remember that card.
Of the modern format. And a lot of people were using Git. It was a probe. I can't remember. Git probe is what I shortened it for. I think it's, I don't know. But anyways, it was they were also using, and that one's basically, it was free. It made your deck thinner, so you could get your combo sooner. But a lot of people started playing another instant spell that cost one enter. Look at me, I'm switching over to a full Wixoss player. 1 mana, and allowed you to look at the opponent's hand. I think it was actually called Peek. That's it. Yeah, it was called Peek. And so it would let you look at the opponent's hand, and then you would draw you a card. And a lot of pros didn't play it, and a lot of people who weren't pros did play it. And there was this debate between the pro community and the non-pro community about why wouldn't you run this if you run the other one, probe, which basically does the same thing, but it costs you 2 life instead of spending a resource. And the pros basically said, I don't need to know what's in my opponent's hand. I already know what's in my opponent's hand. And it's like,
wow, that is some big energy.
Well, it made sense, right? Because they were good enough to understand what was in their opponent's decks and what was being played against them. And based on the way that the opponents were acting, playing, or working around certain things, they basically could make deductions as to what was in their hand already. It was basically like a non-known commodity. They knew it. So the idea was that if you played Peek, you needed a crutch in order to win, because you weren't good enough to deduce what was in your opponent's hand.
It's therefore, a little mean.
Yeah, but therefore you had to waste a resource to try to gain that edge that your lack of knowledge or skill could do. So this is kind of where we're coming here on our Wixoss stuff here, being like, yeah, you should, if you're a good enough Wixoss player and you're playing against a deck that you can kind of suss out most of the things for it, you should know what's in the opponent's hand at all points in times. Like there are jokes where Tiffany and I are playing and I'm like, yeah, how's that Hamlin in your hand doing? And you're like, shut up, because you like are like, I just can guess because
that's how I sound like to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you've got the 2 blue enter chilling in your enter, and you've like been like picking at it but not having a great time for doing it, and then you play something else, and now you don't have the blue enter, and it's like you can kind of deduce these things, right?
Yeah, or I'll go into like my attack phase and I'll be like, go ahead, Madoka break, I dare you.
Yeah. So it's sort of like one of those things where it's like, at some point, you get good enough at figuring out what this is. And what that needs is 2 things. One, knowledge of the card base, and what could be on the opponent's field, right? And the meta helps you understand that as well. And the second one is picking up on context clues. And so what we're going to talk about is we're just going to lay it out plain for you guys. Some context clues that we've been gathering over the last couple months of things that we've noticed that players do, and that will help us make an informed decision as to what's going on in their hand. Now, here's the cool thing, too, is at the end of this, we're going to talk to you about how you can weaponize this, make it figure out how to win based off those things. Or, and this is a real thing, how you can pretend like you can bluff those key clues, allow people to make misplays, and then take advantage of it.
Sneaky.
Tiffany, I'll tell you straight up. There are some Wixoss players who I actually genuinely consider are better players than me. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll play badly on purpose.
Just to like trip them up a bit?
Right, because then they'll start making an assumption of like, oh, he must be doing this to do this, and just send them down a wrong rabbit hole, right? Like baiting them to make a mistake.
You're
so that
using
way I can
reverse
psychology
on them?
Yeah, it's bluffing. And it's a real thing. Poker players do it all the time. And so it's
just another card game.
Yep, it's just another skill that you can do. Now, I'm not saying like, be a jerk all the time, but I'm just saying it's something that you can do.
Yes. So here are our tips and tricks for level, like, let's call it level 1 peeping.
Yeah, we might go into another episode of this, like level 2, where we go like, all right, well, if you see them looking at their trash a lot or something, like actual player actions that you can capitalize on. But these are just the basic ones. These are the ones that definitely I think all people who are considering themselves a competitive player should be looking out for.
And if you're a beginner player, then these will probably be helpful to you. And as always, if you have your own tips and tricks, please leave them in the comment section down below. If you guys like this video, maybe we'll make a part 2 and integrate some of your own tips and tricks.
Absolutely. I would love to see other people's tips and tricks.
Yes.
So let's these are roughly loosely categorized together, but let's start with the assists lines.
The assist lines.
Right. So you can talk about the centers grow being like, oh, is it going to be this center? Is it going to be the other center? That's not really that hard to figure out. Which one's the more powerful one, right?
Right.
But the second thing is the assists, which is, let's say they have a drawing assist on them, right? Something like
a Madoka float,
X gazer, or
like a lion
dig. These types of things, right? They've got a line that you can see here, they've got a Madoka. It's probably going to draw them cards, right? Mm-hmm. They got an Umir. It's probably going to draw them cards.
Right.
But they don't use that on their turn
first turn. Mm-hmm.
What could that mean?
In my mind, when I see that happen, or I assume that that's an assist that they have and they don't use it, I would come to the conclusion that the player has a really good hand and they don't need to use it yet.
Yeah, generally speaking, we use those assist lines to ensure us getting as guards as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. So if they don't do it, they probably have a guard in hand already. Mm-hmm. The other reason they could do it is if you're a discard deck, and this is only if you're a discard deck, they might be holding back on trying to blow all their resources. And then the vice versa, if you're a discard deck and you do see them go for it on turn 1, it might mean that they don't have a good hand. And they need to fix it, which means that gives you the opportunity to shred it. Mm-hmm. But that information could be good. You could be basically saying, okay, so they have a guard on this turn, but since they didn't fluff their hand up with any extra cards, then that means my amount that I need to make them discard is not 5 anymore, it's 3, and that's easier, and they have the guard, so I should do it.
Yes. Like, this is, if you're a discard deck and you see your opponent not using their draw assists, if you can assume that they have one, now would be the time to start doing your like turn 1 random drain or a monument if you have it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Tiffany, another assist thing that might happen. You see the opponent in front. You're an aggro deck. You see the opponent in front of you. Their assist line is a Madoka and a Lion. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
It means they've either got a Madoka break, a Madoka clap, or in the rare case, a Madoka dub, and they definitely have a Lion disrespect.
That's correct. And so you should look at that, analyze it, and go, do they really have 2-3 stops in their level 2? And if the answer is yes, that's probably good for you. I'm going to be just flat out and say here, anyone who's got, I shouldn't say it that way, but I don't think it is correct to run 2-3 stops on your level 2.
I would agree.
Because that's 5 enter plus 2 cards each, and barely any deck can afford that.
Yeah, and typically, if you're making both of your assist lines do the same thing for you, it's just not very efficient.
Right.
But that would also mean that they're going to be very like enter dependent. Mm-hmm. They're probably going to need some extra cards in their hand to discard.
Yep.
And you want to you just want to be careful as to like when and where you're pushing your swings.
Right.
Because it's more likely that they will be able to stop you on certain terms.
And I think this is probably a more likely thing, is that Madoka is probably not a 3-stop.
Ooh, what would you think it is instead?
Probably dub. Mm-hmm. Right, a 1-stop plus utility. Mm-hmm. It could be break, because that's lane opening. If they're a heavy discard deck, it theoretically could be. I've seen it, played like that, where it's played more as just
We've seen it.
Way to open up.
We've seen things.
Yeah, we've peeped it.
We've peeped it.
But that's just a thing. You can do sort of a process of elimination there as well. Mm-hmm. So that's all we've got with the assist lines. The other thing that's pretty obvious is if you guys just know what the common and powerful assist lines are, then generally speaking, you can kind of suss out what is in front of you at any point in time, right? Like another one is the Machina assist line.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
It's usually Wing Slash, but sometimes it'll be one of its other 2 options.
Yeah, it's usually Slash and Smash. Mm-hmm. But I've also seen Slash and Bind. Yep. Which is a weird one and like really threw me for a loop when I came across that during a competition. That was super fun.
In a very, very rare case, it's the Machina, which I can't remember what it does, but it's 0 enter and it throws a card from their trash into their life cloth. Mm-hmm. Usually more aggressive decks will run that one over others. So you can do again, knowing the card field will help you figure those things out.
Yes. So what do you do to counteract stuff like that? Like now that we're aware of it, we know what it could mean. How do we play against or prepare ourselves to play against the assist lines?
So for example, Madoka Dub needs blue enter to do its utility function, so you could attack that. Or you could say, well, now that I know that I'm not 3-stop, it means that I can force their 3-stop this turn. And if I do, the defenses are now open, they can't do a full lane stoppage again.
Yeah.
So I can then push harder on my next turn to counteract it. You know, that's the information is you use it correctly. Like if you know what's in their Elrig deck, you can then play around the Elrig deck.
Right. So what do we got next?
Enter.
Enter.
There's a lot of information that goes into the enter, and
yeah.
rarely do people ask for it. I often find myself, even on webcam battles, where people aren't asking what are on in my enter, and I usually am asking things like, hey, that card that you just put into your enter, what is it, right?
Yeah.
Like, Life Cloth goes into the enter, right? You see what the life bursts of the deck are, and often people won't just put random life bursts in there. It will be, like, more congealed into being like I've got six like kind of the same type flavor. Or something.
Yeah.
So you can look at that and make decisions on your attack turns because of that. The enter also can inform you as to what's in their hand, which is kind of strange, right? Because it does originate in their hand often.
Yeah, that's generally how flow goes. I'll be honest, there have been some games where I've told people to count in their enter how many what's it called, life bursts there are in their enter, or like looking at the levels of Signies in their enter. So let's go more into depth into that. What would we be looking for specifically?
So let's
for
say
level 1 Peeping.
Let's say you're playing a green deck, right? And they enter an Animirage turn 1.
You're playing a green center.
You're playing against a green center, and they enter Animirage, which is a black card, on turn 1. What you should be looking at when that, and they play then maybe a green and another green level 1s. What you should be looking at with that is saying, oh, my opponent's probably light on green, right? If they're making choices where they are off color entering, it usually means that this is their excess to enter. And then that could usually tell you, okay, so if I'm playing a deck that can enter Starve or enter Deny or enter Burn, I should probably be targeting their green. Right? That composition automatically, you use a little bit of previous knowledge to know that like green is not very powerful of a color. So generally speaking...
Hashtag justice for green.
So generally speaking, decks that are green centers are probably only 16 to 20 cards green heaviest. Whereas, for example, blue centers are generally speaking like 30 to 35 cards.
It's a lot easier to run like a 2/3 to almost a mono color deck,
right,
outside of green.
So you can put those like pieces of information together to weaponize it. But generally speaking, knowing that the opponent might be struggling a bit with enter is good, especially like for against something like Bang. Let's be honest, Bang uses usually the Elrig is got a green cost of growing to 2, growing to 3, so that's going to give you 3 green cost, plus its main ability costs green, that puts you at 5 green cost, and then Energy Door costs green, so that puts you at 6, and if they want to use a Osagetsune or a Parajulius, that's another green, so that's putting them at 7 to 8 green enter costs per game. Yeah, you might with only 16 cards in their deck that might be green, you could probably do it.
You can also see the Bang deck in action in our previous Versus video of Bang versus Lion, if you want to check that out after you finish this podcast.
Yep. So just, that kind of deck building information can give you an edge. Another one is, what if they enter a level 1 on turn 1?
I would say that they're flooded with level 1s.
Yep. They probably don't have a good late game hand. And that might be a cue for you to say, well, if I have targeted discard, right? Like, for example, Peeping does do targeted discard. Umir does targeted discard. You can potentially use that information and say, all right, well, they don't have a good late game hand. Let's ruin their late game.
Let's start shredding it away.
What if they enter a servant?
I would say
this could be at any point in the game, by the way.
Yeah, if they enter a servant and it's not coming from their field, I would say one of, if not both, things. They're either going to be using the servant for an off-color cost.
Yep.
Or they have multiple servants in their hand, so they can kind of spare one.
Yep.
That's what I would say.
Yep.
That's bold move, honestly.
But sometimes you do it. Sometimes you enter a servant because you're like, I need this extra red cost. Why why are they, and then you got to think, well, why do they need an extra red cost, right? Like in their enter, I can see a blue and I can see a black. Why are they putting a servant in there? Oh, the answer is because they are trying to maybe do red. What's red? Hera? No. Oh, maybe it's Entwined Supremacy. All right, let me get them off of, like, that's the one I'll target. I'll get rid of that servant, because then they can't Entwine Supremacy. If they can't Entwine Supremacy, they can't damage me out of this game. You know, this is
Or you could see, like, you can see what colors, I mean, this is all to say, what colors are they low on? What are they going to be trying to use the servant for? It also might be a case of they're trying to get that to grow their center. Yep. Especially if you're an Enterburn deck, it can mean that you're on the right track. You're kind of pushing them back on their toes.
Yep. And likewise, and we'll get this more when we talk about the playing a Signy. If they play a servant, there's a bunch of different reasons for it, but one of it could be that they need that color.
In their enter zone, you mean?
Yep. So then the last one is they start ensuring that they hover around a certain number of enter in their enter zone.
It's a big tell. And I think that you could say this for most card games. Like, I know in Magic the Gathering, when you have, like, a counterspell, I think it costs, like, 2 blue.
Blue.
Is that right?
Yeah,
so if you have got, like, 2 blue open and you know what that is used for, then it's almost a guarantee that they have that.
Yeah, there has been games where, kind of bluffing, like you said, I've played Madoka Dub, and I've just kept 5 enter open in my enter, including one of them being blue. And like, people played around it and then started not overextending. And my goal was just to make them play a little slower because I had this good late game. And then when I had to do it, I played Dub, and they went, wait a second, it's not Madoka Clap? And I went, well, why did you think it would Madoka Clap? What gave you that opinion?
That is so shifty. You're a shifty player.
You know, but I mean, Magic, they do that all the time with the counterspell, right?
For sure.
Like sometimes you'll see an opponent go, tap this. Wait, no. Untap the island, so I have that untapped. And then go for it. And they don't have a counterspell.
Yeah, they're just bluffing.
They're just bluffing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a thing to keep in mind for. You often will see when people are, like, physically fussing with their enter, that's something you should start looking at. Like, that's a physical cue.
Especially if it's an Ott center deck. They're gonna start organizing and counting things out and putting them into little groups and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is all, like, very obvious, and, like, as a player, like, I'm gonna do that anyways. Like, I've openly told my opponents, like, when I start touching my enter, sometimes it makes people nervous, and I'll tell them, oh, I'm just organizing this, like, because I've got, like, a red and a black and something else, so. When they start touching their enter for no reason.
So, yeah, you can get a lot of information from the enter. You can get a lot of information from the Signy that they're playing on the field. And not just like there's a Monoman, so it's probably a discard deck, which is the obvious one. I assume you guys are already doing that.
Yeah, I see no reason why you would be playing a Monoman if you are not a discard deck.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
So we'll get back to if they're playing a servant, right? The idea is if they're playing a servant, it probably means that they don't have level 1s in their hands. And that's just sort of chilling there now to get vanished later down the line.
Feels bad. Like, it always feels bad when you play a servant.
What's funny is when I see a servant on the field, and I'm any deck that doesn't mind enter starving whatsoever, I usually target that servant as being my number one thing to keep on the field longer.
Oh, for your opponent.
Yeah, because then they don't get the multicolored mana, enter, excuse me.
And it's like taking up a space on their field.
And it's just taking up a space on their field, and it's useless. And so that's one of the ones that I sometimes strain on the field. Like, so using that information of, like, oh, this is the worst case scenario for them, you can sort of abuse this a little bit, is worth mentioning. But it also might mean, again, like we talked about earlier, that they want that servant in their enter so they can get that servant in their trash to maybe recur. So straining it on the field some more so if they flip an, I don't know, servant life burst or something, and they can't put that servant in their hand because
it's not in their
field.
Trash.
Yeah. It's
that feels bad.
You can use that to your advantage. Here's another scenario, and let me ask you this. If they don't match the limit on their field, let's say they got a limit of 7, and we talked about this last podcast, but right now the field of 3-3-1 is probably the most important field state that you can have. If you see them put down a 2-2-3, instead of a 3-3-1. What does that mean to you?
It means that they probably don't have a very optimized hand.
Yeah,
that they're stalling until they can draw something better, especially if they've already used their drawing resources. It means that they might be back on their heels a bit.
Yeah, 100%.
Or they're holding something. Like, I've done that before, where I won't put out, like, the full limit on my field because I'm holding a level 3 for the next turn, when it might be a little bit more beneficial for me to use it then instead of now.
Yep, exactly. Or they just don't have the optimal hand, like you said, and that's
the most likely thing.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be a little more sus if they have like 8 cards in hand and they end up going with a 2-2-3 field or something.
How many of those are guards, you think?
Yeah, you go. Oh, that's kind of telling for information wise.
For sure.
But what if they have a limit of 7 and they end up with a 1-1-2 field or a 1-1-3 field?
That's bad.
Yeah, what does it mean?
I feel like that means that they either have a lot of guards in their hand, or I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Or it means that they've got a lot of spells in their hand, or maybe they have a Rise Signy that they can't use quite yet.
It means their hand's clunky.
Yeah, it means their hand is either flooded or clunky, or they're a little, like, they're a little hand flooded, maybe, especially if they have a lot of cards in their hand.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think it also just means that their hand isn't optimized, but probably not optimized due to being clunky, but probably not optimized due to just having the wrong level Signies in their hand. It also could mean that they may have had to make a stumble earlier into these games. Like, theoretically, when you make a deck, you should be planning out almost every single optimal turn you could do, right? Like, the idea of being like, I'm a Yuzuki deck, and I grow I always grow my Umir on level 2 or level 2.5 or turn 2 defense step or turn 3, so that way I always have a limit of 7 on my turn 3 to enable me to do this level 3, this level 3, and this level 1, right? Like, you should have your deck tuning down a little bit to a science like that, where you have a general idea of what you're aiming to go for. So if you see that they aren't fulfilling those limits, then that might mean something. Maybe they were forced to grow earlier. Maybe they're holding back the grow and it's making them stumble. And that's information that you can then use to go like, all right, well, if I don't force their grow here, then their next turn, they're still going to be limited by the limit they currently have, and that might help me.
Yes.
So that's another one of the reasons you can find information from the Signy on the field. Here's another one, and so this is a strange one, but what if they play you're playing a blue deck. So you're like, all right, I'm going to see Monomins on this field at level 1. I'm going to see...
Your opponent is playing a blue deck?
You're going to see a Hakat on the field level 1. You're going to see some Bradamentes, Neon Tetras, these good level 1s that you might see.
Well, Bruno's level 2, but yeah.
But then they play something weird, like an Abdumala. Right? And I'm saying Abdumala, and I bet you don't even know what that one is.
No, I don't.
It's an angel that basically says... you can, at the beginning of your attack phase, you can discard an angel and draw a card. And then every time you draw a card this turn, your Signies get 1,000 power per card you draw. It's a weird one. It's a weird one is all I'm trying to get at, is it's a weird one.
I would say that their deck is weird.
Yes.
That they are, like, specifically, either this is, like, some sort of homebrew, or maybe they're just trying something out, or basically it's just an off-meta deck.
Yes.
Which means that you need to start expecting the unexpected.
Start reading those cards.
It could also mean that the player's on a little bit more of a budget.
That's true too.
And, like, maybe they either couldn't get their cards in time. I would say most likely, though, it's a player that's experimenting, or maybe they're a little newer to the game.
Yeah, and if you do evaluate that they're a budget player, at that point you could probably make some more confident plays that you shouldn't normally make. You know, some more risky plays, because you're like, they don't have it. That's an ultra rare. They don't got that.
Feels
a
little
kind of
mean.
thing. Or like you might say like, well, what's like normally if you're playing against a team Tamago, right? You might go like, ooh, I'm going to run into four Fenrir's here. But if you're playing team Tamago and you don't like, it's like clear they're playing a budget deck, then you might be like, what's the chances really that they've got four Fenrir? Probably not so high. It's probably only like maybe one or two tops, in which case I can kind of take advantage of this, and I can put Signy out here and attack in ways that I don't care if my field gets frozen because it's not going to happen.
Right, exactly.
Let's get to life bursts.
Ooh, this is fun.
If you are not already looking at your opponent's trash in the mid to late game to find what life bursts they have, just generally speaking, then you're doing it wrong. Like you gotta look at their life, because the thing is, right? Like if I'm running a deck that wants Focalure effects, right? I'm probably also running Akufukus and maybe Troubles, because they all have basically the same life burst,
which is
tap down 2 things and draw a card, or tap down 2 things and or whatever. You don't take 2 damage.
Akufuku's a little different, but yeah, it's basically just damage prevention.
Yeah. So that can give you information. Just what the life bursts are too. Like if you end up seeing an opponent who has a lot of Akufuku life bursts, changes the way that you're gonna attack. But it also means that they probably don't have defensive L-rigs. Like assist L-rigs, because they're having to transfer their defensiveness to the life cloth zone. So maybe you attack slower to get around that. But it also just means like, all right, so I see Animirage and I see a Haniel. There's a high chance that there's also probably dehumidifiers in this deck, or Bernices, because both of those have life bursts that also ambush, take stuff out of my trash and put them into play. So you can start deducing cards that are in their deck. You look in their trash, it's not there. You look in their enter, it's not there. Maybe there's one of, you can be like, all right, well then the numbers are probably this, which means that there's a high likelihood that there's at least 3 more in their deck or hand.
Right. Yeah, you can also count life bursts as well, which is something that I've done. I have asked my opponents to count life bursts in their enter zone as well as in their trash, and seeing how many they have, how much life cloth they have left, I can also make an assumption as to the likelihood that I'll be flipping life bursts. This is especially important when you're like trying to either like swing to win or you will lose.
Yep.
That's something I would recommend. Highly recommend. It's not common to ask for, which psychologically could kind of like put your opponents in like a little bit of like, oh god, what are they doing?
That's
kind
true.
of situation.
Yeah, I mean, so it's about a 50-50 chance to always hit a life burst when you're hitting life cloth. So it's good to look at the life bursts and say, okay, what do they do generally speaking? Okay, got it. What's my chance that this would blow me out if I hit that 50-50? And minimizing the 50-50 risk.
Yeah. So there's also life bursts that are like vanish target upped. As well, so that's going to change how you choose to swing.
And that is a thing we should actually talk about real quick. Is the color of the deck will matter as well as the style of the deck. All colors and styles of decks want different life bursts and have different life bursts. So, for example, you should be getting used to, if I'm playing a red aggro deck, I attack with my 8000s first because they have life bursts that vanish 8000 and lower. And if you're playing a Tama control deck, they mostly, white has vanish target up life bursts. And because of that, you should be attacking with your bigger, more important Signy first, and then your lower level Signy. So it's complete opposite.
This is also the reason why it's okay to swing under, because you're attacking, but maybe the attack does not vanish the Signy across from it, but it will protect your Signy from vanish target up life bursts.
Yep, exactly. The last life burst thing is, what if you can choose not to use a life burst? I think a lot of people don't recognize that that's an option. But let's say it's a draw 2 life burst and the opponent looks at it, right? And they go, yeah, I won't use that.
It means that they're about to deck out.
Yeah.
It means that their deck is super low, which like you can also see that visually most times. Sometimes when you're playing over like webcam, it's hard to tell when your deck is getting, when your opponent's deck is getting really low, but you shouldn't even have to ask how many cards they have left in their deck if they're choosing not to draw a card.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that if they choose not to do a life burst, it doesn't have to be the draw thing. It could be any scenario.
Yeah, it could be anything.
If they're not giving themselves the free beneficial effect, there must be a reason why, and you should deduce why is it that they aren't doing that. Because I'm sure there's a reason, and you'll probably need to know that reason.
Yes. So, I mean, that could be a lot of things. Like, sometimes there's life bursts that are like, pay 1 to do this, or whatever. And sometimes they might choose not to do it because their enter is really low, or maybe they're saving that enter for something else.
Yeah. Yeah. So our next topic too is also attacking and damage, just like game flow things that are happening. So let's say they are playing a deck that probably benefits from having multiple cards in their trash. They play Bernice. Bernice needs to have 10 cards in its trash in order for its effect to get bigger, right? It becomes a 7,000.
Yeah, same thing with Baphomet.
Yeah, or Baphomet only needs 5, and it mills itself.
Yeah.
But you're saying, yeah, it's playing that type of deck, right?
It's that type.
And they are maybe at 8 cards in their trash, and they've got two Bernices out. You vanish one of their Bernices, but they choose to mill you instead of milling themselves. Now, if they mill themselves, they'd get to that requisite 10, and it would turn on things like Tama, it would turn on things like Bernice, but they chose not to, and they chose to mill you instead, right? This type of stuff that's sort of breaking the normal game flow of stuff should inform you about something, right? This probably means that they're trying to mill you out later down the line.
Right. Like they are it could be a tell that they are a mill deck, meaning that they're not just milling themselves,
Right.
but they're trying to deck you out.
Other stuff too includes like, what if they aren't attacking, right? Like if they're leaving their Signy up and aren't destroying your Signy, they're probably enter starving you. If they're enter starving you, what does that mean? It means that they want to go longer games so that way your less efficient enter will matter. And that's something that you've got to then consider and go, all right, I need to be conservative about my enter now because of this. Or if they have the enter to open lanes, but they're purposefully keeping the game slow, it means something, right? It means that they're denying resources for you.
Yes.
Like if you end up seeing an opponent, like I don't know, there's never been really this situation, but if the opponent plays a Lancelot, could have the enter to kill something, the thing on the field is killable and it will open the lane and they choose not to do it, that needs to be like a red flag to you.
Yeah, I would say that they're either trying to resource deny me or that they might be a little bit of an inexperienced player, which is not bad, but it would be something that as an opponent I would make note of.
Sure. So, but if I did it, if I played a Lancer against you, a Lancelot against you, and then I was like, I'm not using it.
You're trying to resource deny me, and you also might have access to something like Lancer or Assassin.
Right. Something's up.
Something is up because you're a shifty player and you cannot be trusted.
That's true. So just keep in mind, if things are going weird in the flow of the game, counterintuitive to what you would normally do, it should stand out as a flag.
Yeah,
to you
that's
that
a
something's
tell.
Up. Yeah. And the last one is we're going to talk about how you can. We talked briefly on this stuff about how you can weaponize this information, but we want to talk more in broad scope about this. And this was actually a comment on one of our videos. Asking for if we could go more into it about, like, for example, how an aggro deck might have a bad matchup against a mid-range deck or something, and how do you even get yourself a chance to win in those bad matchups, right? And we're folding this sort of idea into Peeping because you need the pre-information that you get from the context clues in order to try to get these things open, right? And the 3 major things that we're going to talk about are baiting, catch-22ing, which is your favorite one, I'm sure.
I love it.
And then long-term strategy.
Long-term strategy.
So I'll start with baiting because
You're pretty good at
I'm
that.
actually, not to toot my own horn here, I think I am pretty good at baiting.
Yes. So what is baiting? What does baiting your opponent mean?
So there's 2 different ways you can do it. One's through bluffing, right? By basically putting out this persona that you have something that you don't actually have, or that you are able to do something and are holding back, for example. And that is one way to do it, right? And then the opponent will play around something, an imaginary landmine that doesn't actually exist, which will allow you to then sort of like eke things to go more in your direction that you want it to do. Another way is to put something on the field, like, for example, literal baiting. Put something on the field that is like so it needs to be answered right now. You force your opponent into doing something that they wouldn't normally want to do.
Yeah.
So, for example, my opponent has a Madoka Clap on the other side of the field. Or I have deduced that they have a Madoka Clap on the other side of the field, right? I open a single lane. I put down a I put down a Nobunaga. I give it Double Crush.
Right.
Now I'm being like, you will take this Double Crush and you will lose the game because of it. Or you will grow your clap super inefficiently early. And because of that, I've now conserved enough stuff on my turn that on my next turn I'll destroy you.
Right.
Right? You have to create these windows of opportunity that you wouldn't normally get in a bad matchup. And baiting is so important to aggro decks.
It's really important.
Like
this is what we mean. This is one of those scenarios that we mean that you have to be a smart aggro player. You have to know when to bait your opponent to be proactive in their game when they should be not reactive.
When they should be...
you want them to be reactive when they should be proactive.
Right.
Yeah,
or
you want them to...
Inefficient is
inefficient, yeah. You're trying to get your opponent to be less efficient with their deck because you, as an aggro player, thrive when your opponent is making hasty decisions.
Right. Like another one might be that you do something like target Exia with an open lane. They close down the open lane. You go, cool, thank you. And then you play a Yuki and move it into that closed lane now.
Yep.
Right? Like you're baiting them to take the easy answer because you need to take advantage of it. You need to find ways to make these 2-for-1s that you wouldn't normally be able to do. And basically you need to make your opponent stumble, right? Like that's a thing. You are playing a bad matchup. You need to take riskier options to try to win because you're not going to win otherwise.
Yeah. I feel like this kind of falls into the category of catch-22s as well, because catch-22s can be in and of themselves a way to bait.
Yes.
Because what the difference between baiting and catch-22s is catch-22s is setting up a scenario where there is no good answer.
Correct.
There is only a lesser of two evils.
Yeah. I think an easy way to do it is baiting depends on you're creating an opportunity for your opponent to make a mistake, whereas catch-22s, you are giving them no quarter.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
I love setting up catch-22s personally, mostly because I find that with the decks that I play, I can set those up more efficiently.
Sure.
I think that they're really easy to set up with mid-range decks as well as aggro decks. For the most part, it's doing something like making a push to open all lanes, knowing that your opponent has something like a disrespect.
Right.
And pushing a lot of threats at once.
Correct.
And this can be like, this can be at any point in the game. It doesn't have to be like the last stand kind of turn. All you're doing is you're saying, you have to answer this right now, otherwise this is going to end up very badly for you.
Yeah.
Which is different than baiting, because baiting is something like, you can answer this now. Maybe you don't have to, but you probably should. And then with catch-22s is like, you have to do something.
A good scenario for a catch-22, right? Like a bad catch-22, in your opinion here, would be like, you've deduced that the opponent has a Madoka Clap. They're going to shut down your entire lane, right?
Yeah.
It's going to cost them 5 enter, 2 cards, but that's it. And then they're not going to take damage, and they're going to do whatever on their turn. A bad version of a catch-22 would be like, okay, so let me force their hand for that Madoka Clap. Let me open up every single one of their lanes by using Deafening Infernos and Lancelots. I've wasted a lot of resources, a lot of cards. I've blown open their lanes, and I get shut down. That's overextension. You're going to lose that game now.
Yes.
A way that you don't, though, is you use Love It Mix, right? For 3 enter, you vanish something on their field, you give one big thing on your field, Lancer, and you give one small thing on your field, Assassin.
Yes.
You now have the same thing. You can go... You are presenting 3 damage here.
Yes.
And the opponent needs to react to this. And you used one card to do it. So you used one card and 3 enter to present this field with. And by the way, it doesn't matter how your Signy look. They can be the worst Signies. That's fine.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. A Life Cloth Crush is still a crush.
They can all be Ramels, and like you're just sitting there with like...
They can all be guards, for goodness sake.
And you don't mind if they go to the trash, because you still have your Lancelots in hand because of it. And then they play Madoka Clap, discarding 2 cards, paying 5 enter. That means that they've paid 2 more enter than you and 2 cards to answer your 1 card that you've done. You're winning that matchup. That's a bad catch-22 for your opponent.
Yes. And that's kind of what we mean. I'm sure a lot of players out there, you have either built catch-22 scenarios, or you have been the recipient of catch-22 scenarios. And maybe you've also been the recipient of baiting as well.
Another one might be, for example, the Madoka Clap player has 3 cards in hand, right? One of them is a guard, and they're expecting to live out this turn by doing this. And then you, out of nowhere, play Peeping, the topic of the podcast.
And you take that guard.
You strike away... let's say it wasn't Peeping. Let's say it was just any form of discard. You played a Monoman. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Whatever.
Random Monoman your opponent wasn't expecting.
The important thing is that they went down to 2 cards.
Yeah, they're now at 2 cards. This means they can guard, or they can block that third lane.
Clap.
Right. They can't do both.
Nope.
And this is your catch-22 that you're presenting them. It's not baiting. You've just...
Yeah, do you stop 2 damage and guard, or do you stop 3 damage?
Right. You've realized there's no way that you can beat this clap. So the best thing you can do is minimize it by doing a catch-22.
What would you guys do in that scenario? Let us know in the comments section down below.
The last one is long-term strategy.
Okay.
So this is to say, basically... this is the accumulation of everything here. Utilizing all of the information that you've gained. The earlier you can gain it, the better, because knowledge is power. When you have figured out what your opponent... Like, if you watch your opponent, and we are getting to this point, you and I, where the opponent opens, right, their centers and their assist L rigs. They draw their cards, they play their first enter, and they put their fields of level 1s out. From that alone, that 1 turn alone, you can probably figure out 80% of their deck composition. You can figure out what's probably going to be in their life burst. You can figure out how much enter they're going to be using through the course of the game. You're going to figure out what their defense lines are through their assists. You can probably then make a good understanding of using all that information to deduce what their pieces are going to be and what the flow of the game is going to look like, and what they're going to be doing to try to push forward damage, and what you're going to be doing trying to push forward damage. And using all that information, you can then make a long-term strategy. Right? My opponent is going to enter starve me this game. I need to be conservative about the enter I use. My opponent is going to be rushing me down. Therefore, I need to I need to put defense above everything else this game. My opponent is going to be attacking slow, blah, blah, blah. Like, one of the reasons why Tama is such a crazy deck in this format with Tama control is because most people just don't know how to long-term strategize against it. The minute that you figured out when we were playing our test game, I should make sure the Tama player is stuck on not having a ton of white cards. They just fumble.
Yep.
and that's the long-term strategy, right? Utilizing all the information that you've gained and absorbed from this just 1 turn to put together a long-term strategy that you're going to go towards.
Yes, and you can further inform this strategy by chaining these tells together. So you're like, okay, they're using a lot of draw, they've got some off-colored stuff in their enter, and I know that they have ambushing life cloth. So now you've got several different pieces of information that you can build on that throughout the game, and also turn by turn. So as many of you know, life bursts, a Wixoss podcast, can change the entire course of a game.
Yep.
So you're always kind of like looking out for certain things throughout until you win the game, because you've used your Peeping level 1 abilities very well.
Yep. So there you go, guys. It's just the idea of how to use context clues to basically supplement information in your brain to outthink your opponent. Because again, card games innately are just information wars.
Information wars. Sure. I mean, that's one way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, they're strategy games.
It is the flattest game of chess ever.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are our tips and tricks for how to use your non-piece peeping abilities. We would love to hear some tips and tricks from you guys in the comments section down below. As you know, we read all of your comments and look forward to talking to you in that section. You can also look forward to our community tab where you'll be able to vote on upcoming versus matches, and maybe we'll show you how we're using our peeping abilities in those. So please make sure you check out that tab and vote and comment on those posts as well.
It's true. I think a pretty quick peeping for you guys is I'm still trying to figure out what deck I'm going to be playing for next week or what the two options are. But Tiffany has narrowed her options down. She's gonna attempt some form of control deck.
I will be. It's the last deck type that I have not played. So look forward to me doing that. I can't. It's going to be interesting. That's
definitely
for sure.
Will be fun.
It's going to be fun. So if you guys like this podcast, please give it a like and we'll make more of these in the future. And just so you don't miss any, please make sure you subscribe to the Life Burst podcast. As always, may you always flip a life burst.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.